Before you today is three of my aging, heavily depreciated luxury cars, starting with my 1996 Buick Park Avenue, my 1995 Mercedes C36 AMG, and my 1993 Lexus ES300 5-speed. Now, lining up this trio might look like I'm filming a commercial for a really sketchy car lot on a bad side of town, but no, these are all my cars, and I'm not selling them, and I really love all of them for totally different reasons. All three of these cars were extremely rare, and they were only made for a few years and can be purchased for very reasonable money. They're also very reasonable to keep running for the most part. So you really don't have to be rich to own a unique car that will cause people to do a double take when you show up at the local Cars and Coffee. There's videos on all three of these on my YouTube channel, and they've gotten more interest than my recent Ferrari purchase. While that seems crazy, it actually makes sense, as there's so much crap online about Ferraris, and you can usually spot a few at a decent car show, but when's the last time you saw a Lexus ES300 with a stick, or the first full production AMG, or a supercharged Buick that wasn't all hoopty-fied? All three are very unique and come at the luxury car game from totally different angles. And at least to me, they are way more interesting than today's offerings. Nowadays, nearly all luxury car makers are trying to make the same thing. They're all similarly styled with similar performance characteristics and similar features. But if you were shopping for a luxury sedan in 1995, the difference between brands and their approach to building what they thought was the best luxury car was miles and miles apart. First, I would like to get all the meaningless statistics out of the way, as that's how most people make comparisons, which I don't think really matters as much as how they feel. But as you would guess, the cheapest and slowest of these cars when new was the 1993 Lexus ES300. Its 3-liter V6 only put out 185 horsepower, and at 0 to 60 was something like 8.5 or 9 seconds. Next is my 1996 Buick Park Avenue, which was the only year of this body style to have the Series 2 3800 V6, putting out 240 horsepower, which would launch this land yacht to 60 at a respectable 7 seconds. Then there's my AMG, with its punched-out inline 6 that was hand-built by AMG, putting out 268 horsepower and sending this sedan to 60 in only 6 seconds. Despite the price and performance difference, each car is fun to drive in its own way, and if I was a mid-level executive at Enron in 1995, I would really have a hard time choosing one of these, and here's why. For this video, I'm going to summarize my 3 favorite parts of these cars and the biggest things that I don't like, starting with this Lexus. This ES300 was the first mid-size sedan offered from Lexus that wasn't a rebadged Camry. This car is longer, heavier, and wider than the Camry. Now, the engine is generic and nothing special, but it is invincible. Of all the cars in today's hoopty fleet shootout, this one would certainly be the cheapest to run and the most reliable. If it did ever break, it would be dirt cheap to fix. Speaking of cars that aren't cheap to fix, there's a broken BMW 8 Series in the way, so I'm going to have to move the Mercedes to move this out to drive it and give my impressions. Of course, I love the 5-speed manual, which is something you would never find with a Lexus or just about any other automaker anymore, and it's really a shame. In addition to rowing the gears, I really like the build quality of this car. Like most Japanese vehicles, everything is really well put together, but there is one annoying thing that I keep doing with this car, and that's turning up the climate control temperature when I meant to turn up the radio. They use nearly identical knobs and they're in almost the exact same place, which is weird because this car is really well thought out otherwise. Now, this thing is not particularly fast, but it is a lot of fun to drive since it's so engaging. The lightness and nimbleness of the steering wheel and the manual gearbox means you'll never get bored and can still toss this thing around and drive it like an idiot, but it's still a luxury car first and a sports car second. That's really what all these three have in common, and yes, even the Buick has a little bit of spice to it. Let's move on to my 1996 Buick Park Avenue, which is certainly the biggest car of the bunch, and it's in the same weight class as probably a Mercedes S-Class and a BMW 7 Series, but it was way cheaper than a Lexus LS or an S-Class or any of those, and I think it's way more interesting than a Buick LeSabre midsize sedan. It just didn't have nearly as many cool features as this Buick Ultra, and at 240 horsepower, that's not the right key. There we go. You can turn off the traction control and really light up the tires. It's hilarious. Of course, I love how this Buick can surprise people off the line, but I also like that it's the leader when it comes to technology. You wouldn't expect this in a Buick. But this isn't all stupid technology just to be cool. It all serves a purpose, like the Star Trek style warning panel above the dashboard and the endlessly adjustable pillow top seats that are insanely comfortable. And they're heated as well. And the coolest part of the Buick has to be the volume knob, which I showed in my last video about this car. It moves up and down with the steering wheel controls. It's cool as hell. And the other thing that I love about this Buick is all the buttons and knobs are really sturdy. Some are actually metal switches, or they're at least pinned to metal panels. Unfortunately, Buick decided to go way downhill with their interior quality after this year, and the styling of the outside got way too blobby for my taste. The only thing stopping this car from being a legend would be if it was not front-wheel drive, but back then there was also the rear-wheel drive Roadmaster with the Corvette engine, but the ride quality of those doesn't even come close to the Park Avenue. This is the best. It's one of the best riding cars I've ever driven. Now, my C36 is rear-wheel drive and the sportiest of the bunch, and it's the roughest riding, but it's still old school in the way that it delivers the luxury experience. This car was designed just before Mercedes decided to enter the luxury techno gizmo wars that has now cluttered up cars with endless gizmos, since that's now one of the biggest measurements of a luxury car, how much crap it has for technology. But for Mercedes at this time, the best luxury car meant the best quality car. And this thing is really high quality. Let me tell you. Once again, this key thing. There we go. Okay. In 1995, Mercedes was still on top of their game, and they achieved this by fitting the car with the highest quality parts and materials with a top-notch fit and finish, and it's one of the things that I like most about this car. It's the last generation to have that bank vault feeling when you get inside, and this really does feel like a baby S-Class. Of course, being the first full production AMG is another cool part of this C36, and I love how this car is just a parts bin special, with brakes from an S600 and a transmission from a 500e, along with all the subtle styling touches that make this car gorgeous. But I need to stop talking about the performance because this is a luxury comparison, and here's what I like most about this car, and I think it really resounds with where luxury cars are going today. Yeah, this AMG is sporty, but it doesn't compromise on comfort. This car is still super comfortable. The seats are soft and cushy, and they're not rock-hard sports seats that just ruin your spine. Even with aftermarket lowering springs, the suspension isn't jarring or uncomfortable on this thing either. The changes made to the exterior of this AMG car are subtle too. It doesn't look like someone glued pieces of the Batmobile on a sedan like new cars. For me, this car is the perfect blend of sport and luxury. And AMG used to be like this for many years, but have now gotten more aggressive looking and acting so they can beat BMW M performance cars on the track. And who cares about that? A lot of people, but I don't. The only thing that I don't like about this car is it's certainly the most expensive to fix and the least reliable of the bunch. European engineers can't help but design fatal flaws into their cars, and this car was no exception, with its biodegradable wiring harness, failing head gaskets, and in later years with the C36 and the C43 V8 car that followed this, grenading transmissions. Still, it's a pretty solid car, but compared to old Japanese and American cars, it's not even close on the reliability scale. So that's all I have to say about these goofy old things, and to me it's way more interesting to do this rather than line up 3 of the latest offering from these automakers and compare their similarly blobby styling and how they are becoming one giant iPhone that can drive itself around a racetrack, so all you do is sit in the uncomfortable seats that give you scoliosis, and you'll be really bored driving these cars at legal speeds. And me just saying that has killed my chances of ever getting a press car. Whatever. Anyway, thank you for watching.